Okay, it looks like we're live. So if we had some technical difficulties a second ago, so if you can't hear me, just put a message in the chat box. I want to say hello to everyone and thank you for joining my session today titled Both Sides, Intersectionality in Times of Crisis. My name is Maurice Smith. I am the executive producer, co-host, and a number of other titles and hats that I wear over at Category Is Podcast. So if you haven't heard of us, people always ask where we got the name Category Is from, and they always think that we got it from Pose, the TV series that's on Fox. But actually, no, we got it from the 1989, 1990, the iconic documentary Paris is Burning. It used to be on Netflix, it's not anymore, but if you haven't heard of it, definitely check it out. We wanted something that was very iconically gay, but also very iconically Black and gay, like specifically. So we launched our podcast in fall of 2018. Since then, we had gotten like a number of different accolades and recognition across the country, across the globe. We're also named Rising Stars by Attitude Magazine, which is one of the highest, if not the highest selling gay magazine in the UK. So we're popular across the pond. We are currently winding down our second season, which is going to culminate in our 100th episode in a few weeks. So excited about that. We are a weekly pop culture podcast. We, talk about things from a very unique lens specific to who we are. We like to be authentic. We're two gay Black men. We happen to be ex-boyfriends. That's a little interesting fact about our podcast. But we're just not afraid to present, defend our thoughts, our opinions, our just perspectives on life and everything that's going on in the world today. We have a couple cocktails that makes things a little bit easier, and we just talk about life. We have open dialogue about life, relationships, things that are going on in the world, in our lives today. So we like to say that we provoke thought, we start conversations, but at the heart of everything, we like to have fun, no matter what the category is. So we started our podcast in order to fill a void that we felt was kind of lacking in the podcasting world, because my co-host, Justin, he was a very avid podcast listener. He listens to 15, 20, maybe more podcasts. And like every time we would kind of get together, and he was always listening to one in the car. Weekly we'd kind of get together for dinner or drinks or something. He was always listening to one. And, he kind of would talk about, oh, I listened to this one because it speaks from this perspective. I listened to this one because it speaks from that perspective. But there wasn't one single podcast that he felt really spoke to him as a Black gay man. And so, that was kind of like the catalyst for us to think about, hey, we could probably do this ourselves. We want to create something that, if we weren't the host, it'd be something that we would be interested in listening in. So we wanted to, represent our complex, multifaceted, multi-layered identities. And, on paper, we kind of present the same or similarly, so we're both Black gay men, living in the city, but, we're so different, like ideologically, and the things that we identify with are just so very different, but it's easy to kind of lump us into one category. Oh, they're just Black gay men. They're all the same. And it's really, really not like that, especially if you hear some of our discussions and some of our conversations on air. They are just two completely different sides, opposite ends of the spectrum. And so that kind of brought me to my topic today, and that is, intersectionality. And, a lot of people don't know what that is. It is kind of a buzzword that's being thrown around a little bit more these days. So if you've heard of a book by Dr. Bettina Love One of my friends is an educator, and so she kind of told me about Dr. Love, and so she has a book called "We Want to More Than Just Survive," and it is about the education system and how it kind of fails Black students in terms of, it just doesn't support students of color. So that's like the main crux of the book, but there are lots of kind of overlap with her definitions of intersectionality. So intersectionality is basically the overlap of social identities, whether they be race, gender, sexuality, class, and how that kind of contributes to like an overall system of oppression. It's like all of these things, these identities that one person has, it can sum up to them being oppressed greater than if they were just one single identity. So she also says that, it's not the same as diversity, whereas diversity is more about, checking that box. Do we have an Asian? Check. Do we have a Black person? Check. Do we have a woman? Check. Do we have a Latino, Latina, Latinx person? Check. That's what diversity is filling that quota of, whatever kind of criteria you want it to be. Where intersectionality is completely different. It is meeting those people who possess multiple identities. A Black woman is an intersectional person. An Asian disabled person is that intersection. And when you contrast that with diversity, it's just checking that one minority box. Then you kind of see the difference there, because some of the biggest beneficiaries of diversity are white women. When affirmative action was big here in the U.S., the biggest beneficiaries were white women, because although affirmative action was supposed to address disparities in race, in ethnicity, and gender, a lot of people sought to fill the diversity box by putting a woman in that position. When you look at it from an LGBT perspective, often the biggest beneficiaries of any kind of LGBT representation, acknowledgement, awards, that often centers around gay white men. So you have people like, you have Anderson Cooper, you have Andy Cohen, who's his best friend. You have Ryan Murphy, who actually is the director, producer, all the hats over at Pose on Fox. And then to a certain extent, you have Ellen, and Ellen DeGeneres is a woman, but she visually kind of, for lack of a better word, she has an aesthetic that is kind of congruent to a gay white man. And in terms of intersectionality, it's important when considering these identities, because the lives, the experiences, just everything that's wrapped up in someone in a marginalized community that exists within another marginalized community. So the Black gay community has far more levels of discrimination and just negative things that are kind of thrown at us within our own marginalized community of being Black. And then you get it from the other side too, because you're gay. And so it's a tough spot to be in. Right now we are, kind of dealing, with, they say it's a racial reckoning for the United States, where, the George Floyd protests and the Black Lives Matter movement is very, very big right now. And it's getting a lot of press, a lot of attention. And, for me particularly, it's tough because, you also see it from both sides. And I'm the child of a police officer. My mom was actually the first woman to be a police officer in our town, down in South Carolina. But with that, it's like, yes, police brutality is a very serious problem for men of color specifically. But at the same time, you kind of see it from the side of the police officers too, especially with the protests, and people have a lot of hate, a lot of anger that is directed at the police in totality, without kind of breaking it down to very specific instances where the police were clearly wrong. And so when we look at instances like that, yeah, it's a tough spot to be in, because you want both sides to be heard, and you want both sides to reach mutual understanding and things. But within the whole Black Lives Matter movement, there have been instances where LGBT members of the Black community have been attacked. Speaking of the Ayanna Dior, is a Black trans woman in Minneapolis. She was attacked at a gas station. And that video was just horrendous to even watch. Here in Philadelphia, a Black trans woman named Dominique Fells was actually murdered about 2 weeks ago. And, there have been comments and posts and articles, and people were saying, just really negative things about members of the LGBT community who are also Black. And so when, I'm seeing these things, I'm thinking, can we have all Black Lives Matter in this instance? And with that, they have been starting to have marches and protests where they're saying, yes, they do, and we're going to come together as a community in order to spread that message that it's not just about prioritizing or putting them in a hierarchy. It's about collectively all Black lives are important and they matter. And when you think, you have to ask the question, well, whose pain is greater? Or do you take the side of, whose issue is more important at this time, in this moment? And Laverne Cox, who is an iconic actress, Orange is the New Black, she was, very prominent on there, and just she's been very active in the community as a whole. And so she posted recently, prior to the Supreme Court case, she was trying to keep everyone focused on what was going on with that Supreme Court ruling, which actually passed in our favor recently. But the responses that she got to that were very, well, wait a minute, Laverne, like, pump the brakes, hold on. We're talking about police brutality now. We'll get to trans issue later, but now's not the right time. And so when you have responses like that, it really kind of negates people who are at the intersection of very different identities. And so I think a part of that is almost like a order of precedence with your identities and how you learn how to move and navigate through the world. So say it kind of happens in the order, I would say. So first, you get your gender assigned at birth, and that's your first kind of identity. You don't know what anything else is, just you're a boy or a girl or whatever your gender assigned at birth is. Second, I feel like people figure out or find out what their race is. It's like, okay, I am Black, I am, and that kind of sometimes happens around school, daycare, like things like that, when they're first getting integrated with other kids. And then eventually we get to sexuality and sexual identity and gender expression and things like that. And I think that with a number of different people who are at the intersection of that, it's like, well, what do I lead with? Like, what is the most important identity to me in this particular moment, in any moment. When I go on a job interview, what are people going to see first? When I go, to any kind of scenario, what do people see me as first? And one of my friends is a political science professor, and we get into a conversation a lot about, especially with politics and the election and things that are coming up. And so she asked me, what do you identify as first? And I'm like, I don't know, because I am Black, I am gay, I am a man, and I can be all three at the same time. And I think that when we look at it that way, then that's not always true, because when I walk into a room, people automatically see that I'm Black first. Like, you can't see that I'm gay. You can see that I'm a male at the same time that you see that my race. And so when looking at things like that, we have to consider the experiences that underlie our physical presentations and manifestations. I think that with in times of crisis, things like the responses to the Laverne Cox post about trans rights and Supreme Court issues, I think that we can't just say, hold on, wait, we'll get to that, because that, often negates the experiences that that person feels. Because in the gay community, we already feel that. Like, we are often ostracized, we're often kind of looked at as less than. You're not as male, you're not as masculine, you're not as this, you're not as, this prototypical example of what you should be. And with that, in the gay community is very isolated, very segregated. And with even looking at, it happens in Philadelphia here, it happens in New York, LA, London. I think anywhere there's a community of LGBT people, the minorities within that community don't feel as accepted, don't feel as included. That's why we have things like regular pride, which is white pride, and then we have gay pride. Black pride, which is specifically for people of color. And with things like here in Philadelphia, we have, even just going out to the bar, you're not going to get served as quickly if you are a person of color. You're not going to be included as much. You're going to be kind of, ostracized there. They charge certain people covers, they don't, and it's things like that, and the microaggressions that already exist within our community. When you add, race, sexuality, when you compound all of those into one, just really makes people who are the minority within a minority feel that much more oppressed, neglected, and not included. And so, we are at a time in the US where, we have to think about the future. And, when we say that Black Lives Matter, are we inclusive of the others within the community? Are we inclusive of trans? Are we inclusive of disabled? Are we inclusive of everyone who falls within this statement of Black Lives Matter? And so I think that with that, it will take time. It will take some work, definitely, with everyone involved. But I do think that, we stand at a time where we can really make a pivotal change in society if we really think about, not just putting up a hashtag or putting up a sign, but really the actions that come behind that, and really wanting to move forward as a people and as a culture. And I think that collectively, we stand at a time where we can really make some changes in the world. So I think I am about out of time. So I think, are we ready for questions?
Hey, you still have plenty of time. Yeah, there is one question. Do you see the ask a question button at the bottom of the screen?
Okay, we have a question in the chat. After equal marriage, what is the next legal milestone that the LGBTQ community needs to attain? That is a really good question. I think that, we wanted marriage equality for a number of years. And, I think a lot of people just didn't think it was going to happen for ever, really. So I think that was kind of the biggest hurdle to attaining equality that people saw for the LGBTQ community. And, it's like we wanted to be treated equal. We want to be able to get married because our straight counterparts can. And once we got that, it was like, okay, now what? I think a lot of people just didn't think of what the next step would be, what the next phase of that would be. There are numbers of ways that we are, discriminated against, and I think the biggest, well, I kind of mentioned it earlier, was that protections in the workplace were going to be in question. And, luckily, thankfully, the Supreme Court in a 6-3 ruling decided that no, we can't discriminate against people in the workplace for these reasons. And I think that was another level of safety for us. I think that with that we're going to see the ramifications of that coming, in the future. So I think, just work security, job security, after the marriage equality, I think those were two of the biggest things that were going to be for the community. Another question: do you feel that African Americans can be marginalized within the community? Absolutely, absolutely. It happens every single day. When we go into, like I said, bars, clubs, we're discriminated against. You have to pay a cover. You have to pay more to get to than our white counterparts pay, or you're not going to get served. You're not going to get any attention at the bar. You're kind of pushed to the fringes of the gathering. It happens on the dating apps, with people who list their preferences. I know that Grindr and I think some of the other dating apps, I'm not on the apps, but they said that they were going to remove like racial filters from the apps and things like that. So that, it's going to kind of try to mitigate fetishism and preferences and basically discrimination. Because in the community, we do have people who say, LGBT should be inclusive of all. We should be representative of all, but it's really not like that. You should see the uproar when the new pride flag came out and it had the black and the brown stripe at the top, and people just really, specifically gay white men, had a problem with that. And it wasn't, it only upset people who were not in the minority because they enjoy a level of privilege and preference that we just don't as minorities. This question: with two soon-to-be openly gay Black congressmen, do you feel their platform will help build a more inclusive moment within the Black community? Absolutely, because with politics and I think you're speaking about the guy, I forgot his name. One's in New York and the other one I forget. But yeah, so they just won their primaries. And yeah, when it comes down to politics and law, I think it does. People only think from the top down. They don't really think from the bottom up, like their local community, their local congressman or representative. They don't really think about how those people really affect the change more so in their day-to-day life. So I think with them being hopefully winning in November, there will be, some changes with what they want to bring to the table. And I really hope that, we do see a more inclusive community as part of that. Challenges for adoption. That I have thought about that, and I've talked to some friends who are considering adoption. And, it is kind of one of those things whenever we have to almost fight for acceptance or, prove that we're worthy and able, whether it be a job interview, going for adoption screenings and that whole process, I think that it's a worry. And I think that with, just, are they going to accept me? Will they look negatively at us because we're gay, or, a gay couple, even a single gay man? I think we do face those challenges of acceptance, and are people going to judge us? And when they find out, and I think that that's a big concern for a lot of people. I really think so. So one question: I thought that Black men were fetished within the community. Is this wrong? No, that is very correct. There, my co-host Justin, he actually spoke about a time where the guy he met on the app was into race play, and he had this whole fantasy scenario set up, and it was it was not good. But with that, it's either people see you as that hyper sexualized object with very large sexual parts, and either want to experience that, or they just have it in their mind that that's what they're going to get. And it is, but then on the flip side, you have people who will totally not even pay you any attention strictly because you are Black. So you have, you kind of have the people who, they want to live that fantasy or that fetish and experience that, or you have people on the flip side who just won't even deal with you at all. So, I mean, it is part of the being marginalized. It's like they don't see you as human, they just see you as an object, or they don't see you at all. And I think that, is part of the problem. For getting acceptance, I think the law needs to provide uniform protections nationally. It seems like this should be consistent with marriage law. Yes, I think it would be great to have it nationally, but also at the state level, states can kind of, talking about adoption, yes, states can interpret the laws in different ways, and depending on who's in power and control in that state, they can kind of, twist it the way they want to. Yeah, I think that they should be consistent across the board, and saying that, it should even be like a consideration, but to some people it is. And I think we can't really get past that at the moment, but hopefully one day we will. So let's see, good questions. Let's see, do I have time for one more question? Maybe. Yeah. Okay. So thank everyone for joining. I want to, really appreciate your time. I know it's been a long day for all of the sessions. We're coming up on the last one, so I just want to say thank you for your time. I hope it was enjoyable. If you have any more questions, I guess you can find me at Category is Pod on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So thanks again.
Okay, thank you everyone, and thank you Maurice. Okay, have a great night.